Hi, this is Bobby Kimbrough, and welcome to Off the Cuffs. I'm very excited today to have with me a friend, a leader, a historian of our city, Miss Martha Wood, the first female mayor of the city of Winston-Salem. Since then, we have not had one. I welcome you here to Off the Cuffs, and I've been looking forward to this, and I want to thank you for taking time to be here today.
Well, I want to thank you for asking
Thank
me,
you.
and I'm so glad your program's called Off the Cuffs because when I was telling my friends that you had invited me here, one of them said to me, a long-time friend said, I knew he'd get you sooner or later.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. We were just talking moments before we started filming, and I was reflecting back to my first time walking in to Salem Town and how you embraced me. And one of the things that I must be candid about is that I have taken one of your phrases and kind of give it in my own words when I talk about we're better together. I'll never forget when you were the mayor, one of the things that you talked about all the time is that there's room at the table for everybody. And that says a lot. There's room at the table for everybody because so many times in our society, not just here in Winston, people don't get a chance to sit at the table. And when they're not at the table, sometimes they get left out of the equation. So I want to thank you for saying that and for living that. There's so much about you that I want to talk about. So first of all, I just want to welcome you. And tell us what made you, long time ago, decided that you wanted to be the mayor of Winston-Salem, because I know that it was not an easy task during that era to be a female and running for the mayor of the fourth largest city in the state of North Carolina. What was that like?
Well, I never thought of it in those terms, that it was going to be difficult. I just thought it was an election, and people run for a public office. They put themselves out there, and the people vote.
Wow.
But I found out there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Yeah.
But I had been on the Board of Aldermen,
That's right,
now the City Council, for 8 years prior to that. And during that time, as you know, the things had really changed. The economy had really begun to change significantly in Winston-Salem when the Haynes companies changed, sold off different divisions and so forth, and then Reynolds,
that's right,
thought that Winston-Salem, or the leader of Reynolds, thought that Winston-Salem was too bucolic for his taste, and so he took the world headquarters down to Atlanta. And it was just a tough blow for our citizens. I mean, they just could not understand what was going to happen to our community after that. And Sheriff, I'd grown up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, in an entrepreneurial family. My parents were first in the grocery business and then in the furniture business. And it was a retail lifestyle for me. And when customers weren't coming in the door, you had to figure out a way to get them in.
Right.
You had to use your noodle to be sure you somehow had the right products, did the right kind of advertising to get them to the table, to get them in the door. And so my mindset was different from the corporate mentality. It was you got to get out there and get your business. You can't just sit back and wait for it to come to you.
Wow. So what brought you to Winston from Cumberland County, from Fayetteville?
Well, Wake Forest College at the time brought me to Winston-Salem, and I spent 4 years there and graduated and met my husband, Frank, and we lived in East Bend, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And then my husband decided that he wanted to go to graduate school. And so we left East Bend and moved into Winston-Salem. We've been here since 1970. So I've lived here longer than I lived in Cumberland County.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So let me ask you a question. So I know you said that was during the time that the Reynolds moved their headquarters down to Atlanta. So when you look back at the city, where we were and where we are, what are some of the things that you see or some of the things that we need to figure out? Because you were the mayor during some difficult times and some stressful times. And so, I always ask people that have sat in a seat, when you sit there and now that you're out of that seat, when you look back in retrospect, what do you see? And what do you see right now that we need to start moving in a direction toward? You and I were talking about how the city has changed, how the landscape has changed, how the downtown has changed. So many things are changing in this city forever and forever. So what would you say some of the differences are?
One of the things that has struck me very much in the last couple of years, certainly since COVID, but even really before then, was the similarities between that time and this time. And that has to do with the violence. We started what we call the Mayor's Violence Reduction Task Force.
That's right.
And we brought everybody to the table. And it was a broad cross-section of this community. That was one thing I really believed in and still do believe in.
So I remember, but vaguely, what were some of the people? Because I'm thinking maybe we need to do that again. We need to really have that conversation again. Who were some of the people or the various players that sat down at the mayor's table?
The main players were people from the neighborhoods.
Okay.
And they included high school students. They included a senior population. They included people from all parts of this community. Ministers, doctors, teachers, principals, and they volunteered for this. It was come if you're interested in this, and we met for I can't remember exactly how long now, but for several months, and a lot of things grew out of that. I remember Judge Loretta Biggs was quite involved in that.
She's a federal judge
and
now.
Yes. And of course, the police chief at that time was George Sweat, and he was very involved in it. And we brought in people. It's not that the leaders of the community were the ones sitting at the table. The people sitting at the table were the community neighbors.
And
it was from all over this community. And you know what I found that was so wonderful to experience? Class, the income level, race, gender, level of ability, all of those things go away when a group of people gets together and starts working on a problem together and saying, and what we said, I should change that. We wanted to come up with solutions, not problems. We said from the outset, we know what the problems are. Now, what are the solutions? What do we need to do? What do we need to make happen? And I just was amazed, Sheriff, to see all those differences just disappear, and people sat down at the table and came up with solutions.
So you think that what we're seeing now is deja vu of yesterday?
Like our baseball player, what was his name? You know who I'm talking about. Said deja vu all over again? Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Yes, and I've really felt for you and your colleagues, for Sheriff, I always call her Sheriff, Chief Thompson. And for the mayor and the county commissioners, because this is not an easy time.
No.
And the school board. I mean, who would ever have thought the school board would be a place where the security officer would have to escort somebody out?
Never.
Come on.
Never would have thought that. I was reading something, you and I were talking, I was reading something, and also I was Googling as well as reading it. It talked about that 20 and 21 have been two of the most difficult years in the past 20 years, and they talked about the reasons why, being COVID, social unrest, and it referenced that while both of them are contagious and both of them are deadly. And so when I think about that, and I think about the difficult times in which you led this community, I think about the difficult times that we're in now, and that there's truly a correlation between that. And one of the reasons that I wanted you here was to pick your brain just a little bit, because, you know, I've read that there's nothing new under the sun, just new players, new participants. And so what you said is still relevant today, that there is room at the table for everyone. So let me ask you this. So, you know, having grown up in Winston-Salem, before I left and came back, I always remember that 52 divided the city. And growing up, I always knew that. And I was always amazed that when I left East 25th Street, right there in front of Bloom Park, and I would ride my bicycle west on 25th Street, and when I crossed over Thurman and got to Collins, the pavement was changed. It was a different pavement that they had there. And I always wondered, and I always remember that, and I would see these big, beautiful homes right there, almost before you get to Stratford, and I would sit there and be amazed at those houses, how they were less than 50 yards, 100 yards from right there off of 25th Street. And so when you look back over those times, do you think that we have grown more together or apart? Have we gotten better? Have we become stagnant, or what, in terms of coming together as a community, erasing that divide?
In many ways, I see a lot of progress. A lot of progress. I see things happening in this community that never would have happened before. I think with that progress, there's always resistance to it. And how to deal with it, with that resistance, is difficult to determine, because you're constrained by whatever is happening at the moment, by a lot of outside aspects of the situation.
Yes, ma'am.
There's much work to be done. Much work to be done. I feel that we often talk but don't act. And our actions don't follow the language we're using. At the same time, I feel that there are times when our language gets in the way of the progress. And I just feel for you guys right now in the leadership positions. I think you're doing a great job, and I really appreciate it.
So, you know, one of the things that, you know, when I read the scriptures, it talks about one of the wisdom, right? Wisdom and knowledge. So, having lived through that difficult time in our history in this city, having sat in the high seat as the mayor of this city, looking at it now, looking from where you have sat, what are some things that you would recommend to the leaders of this community? What were some things that you would recommend to me as well, to the police chief, to the current mayor, to the county commissioners, to the city council? Because so many people are searching for answers. You know, this talks about a generation becoming smarter, but not yet that much wiser. And so what would you give advice, the wisdom that you would share with us, is from where you have sat, looking out right now, seeing some of the same similarities that you saw then? Because we're coming out of COVID, clearly coming out of that. People are putting their masks either in the trash can or in the drawers, whatever they're doing with them, they're not wearing them. So basically, it's almost like we're just coming out of this cloud that we've been in, and people are just excited to go on with their life and just enjoy their life now. And so I would say post-COVID, what would the advice that you would give?
I feel there's so many good things you all are doing. All of you, the folks you've mentioned, you and the police chief and the mayor and the county commissioners. As for the county commissioners, one thing I think they could do immediately, and it looks like they're on the way to making that happen, is to name the downtown library for Sylvia Sprinkle Hamlin.
Mm-hmm.
That woman did more for this community than many, many people who could be honored, for
Festival.
whatever reason.
Yes.
I mean, I have to say, with all due respect to President Reagan, when our school board decided to name that high school for President Reagan, I'm going, there are so many wonderful people in Forsyth County who have contributed so much. Let's honor our own. You may recall that one of the issues that I really am most proud of in my 16 years at City Hall as an alderman and as the mayor is the naming of the Coliseum for Lawrence Joel, who is the only Forsyth County native to have been honored with the Congressional Medal of Honor. And that, honestly, when that happened, when that naming controversy came about, I mean, it was so clear to me that here is a hero of our community, and these are the type of people we need to honor and hold up for our young people to emulate and appreciate.
Wow.
I felt like, if you had heard my phone calls, I felt like I was back in the 60s,
I can imagine.
And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I couldn't believe that was in the late 80s.
It was.
And I couldn't believe it. So I just want to see the county commissioner stand tall and say, yes, this library should be named for Sylvia Sprinkle Hamlin.
I like that.
I think that's one thing. I think we need to be sure that there is room at the table for everybody. And there's also time for everybody to speak.
Mm.
It's not just being at the table. It's being able to be served at the table. And I have to tell you, I learned that from my grandmama from the time I can remember. No matter what was happening, Sunday dinner, whoever came, there was always room at the table, whether she had the plate set right or not. She could always make room for one more. And it's just inherent in my nature to believe that there's a place for everybody. And we need to make sure that happens. The other thing I hope that all of you will do, and I've seen you do this. I've seen you when the young man was killed at Mount Tabor. That high school is very important to us because two of our children graduated from there. I saw you reach out to that family, and you maintained the dignity of your office, the authority of your office, but you showed your humanity and your compassion.
You have to,
and I think you have to, and I hope that you won't be shy about doing what's right and being who you are.
I appreciate that. One of the promises that I made to God is that that's what I would do. I would be who I am, and I would always do what is right. And sometimes, doing right is not popular.
I know that very well.
Yeah. I've had situations, it's almost like there's a test in front of you. What do you do? What do you do? And
Exactly.
I always fall back on that. What do you do?
It's a good way to put it. It's like a test.
Yeah.
And I think it is. I think it's a test of our character and our integrity. I remember after the vote on the Lawrence Joel naming of the Coliseum, a gentleman, I think he was an attorney at Reynolds Tobacco, came up to me. He was in the audience that night. He happened to be a Vietnam veteran. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, that was a vote of moral courage, and that's what we need.
So I remember when you were the mayor, I was still working at the city, and one of the things that I admired about you was that you would always speak truth. Even though I was a young man, I grew up here in Winston-Salem. I saw some of the things that people didn't really want to talk about. I saw the divide. I saw the poverty. I saw the racism. I saw all of it. But one of the things that I admired you for was you always stood up and spoke the truth. I remember when that was going on about the naming of the Lawrence Joel. I remember all of that. And so when I started this political part of my life and I sat with you and I talked with you, you have no idea what that did sitting with you at your place with the other residents, what that meant to me to walk in that room and be received as if I was a part of that family. And so when I look back over that and I think about the people in this community, there are a lot of great people in this community.
Yes,
it is.
Absolutely.
And I think that sometimes it's almost like there's an intent to try to divide us.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I applaud those like you that have stood up and made a moral decision. What is right? Not black, not white, not Republican, not Democrat,
Right.
not independent, but what is right. And so that is powerful. That is powerful. And so I want you to know publicly how much I appreciate you, publicly how much I appreciate your service that you gave. One of the things that I do remember knowing about you is that not only when you got there, you hired the first woman of color to work in the mayor's office.
I did.
I
absolutely did. Beth Stafford.
That's right.
Yes.
Executive assistant for you.
Yes. And she was amazing. She was the first face people saw when they came to the mayor's office.
I know that.
And I think you know Beth. She is so personable and so warm. And she's like you. She's just who she is. And people loved her. There was, I have to tell you this about her. There was one particular county commissioner who was quite conservative.
Mm-hmm.
I am telling you what's the truth. He adored her. He adored her, and he would do anything for her. And I just love that she took anybody who walked in that office.
Yeah.
We had a gentleman come in one day from Crystal Towers,
mm-hmm.
and he was all upset because somebody was trying to get into his apartment. So he had put tinfoil all over the windows in his apartment.
Yeah.
And Beth just took care of him, just like, he was Sheriff Kimbrough coming in, But she could deal with all kinds of people and all kinds of situations.
You didn't just talk it, you walked it.
She was special and still is very special, very close friend.
You truly just didn't talk it, you walked it. And, I think that it's folk like you that have made us better than we were yesterday. And you're right, we've got some work to do. We got a lot of work to do. But I just believe that with the legacy that you left, what we got going now, we're going to get there. We're going to be better. I believe that. I want you again to know how much I appreciate that, the words of wisdom that you left me with. And I'm going to see, can I talk with some people and bring some people to the table? And let's have a conversation about what's happening in our community. How do we change that? How do we deal with that? Bring some people that normally don't get a chance to sit at the table.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's amazing that when I go into situations here in the city, in the county, people want to be heard, and you hear a lot of things when you just don't talk and listen and let them vent. And, you can almost understand why they feel like they do. and how they feel like they do. The pressure, the stress of just everyday life. And you look to people for guidance. You know, we look to each other for guidance. All of us have come on the backs of somebody else. The mayor we have now came on the back of you. You set the platform. This thing is a constant building block. And so I just believe that I want to give you the last word here on Off the Cuffs. I feel like I've been sitting with Queen Elizabeth or somebody sitting here with you. I tell you, because
no, I'm not there yet.
I remember. No, I know you're not there in age, but I'm just talking about in stature. I'm talking about in stature.
Well, that's
definitely
an honor,
not,
but
definitely not in age, stature. Because I remember the conversations that I had with some of our African American aldermen that have gone on. Several of them, I knew them personally, and as a young man, being close to them and working in the city, I would hear the things that they would say. That you were a stand-up kind of person. So I've heard that from them, and they worked right alongside of you. And so I appreciate you. So what I want to do is I want to give you the last word. I know one thing I do want to ask you is that, do you think we'll ever have another female mayor?
I certainly hope so.
You think so?
I mean, come on. How long has it been? It's been way too long. And I know there have been other women who have run for mayor, but I mean, it shouldn't be this long that for a woman to be mayor of the city.
Do you think it's difficult being a woman running for a political office?
It was running for political office, period.
Yes, ma'am.
I do. I think there's an inherent bias toward women for some positions, especially
the mayor.
The mayor.
Yeah.
And we've never had a person of color as mayor of the city.
That's true too.
And this city needs to get ahead of ourselves on that. Yeah. But one thing that the city council has done recently that I've been very proud of is not let Crystal Towers be sold to a private developer.
I saw that.
I was so proud of them for that.
Yeah, I saw that. They backed up on it, right?
Yes. Those folks were very precious to me. They were in my ward when I ran for alderman.
That's right.
And then, of course, when I was mayor.
Right.
And they were wonderful people who lived there. I know many of them have probably gone on by now, but it's the same population essentially. And that's what's that is what bothers me about some of the development I see. We're pushing out a part of the population that still needs to be a part of the community because they are. And it's not out of sight. Well, it is out of sight, out of mind, but that is not the way it should be. I mean, they are part of the people at our table.
And there's room at the table for everybody.
That's right. And I just want to say this.
Sure.
In honor of Women's History Month.
Yes, ma'am.
As I think back on the people who have really influenced me in my life, there are men, yes. But it's been the women in my life. My grandmother, my father's mother, I never knew my mother's mother. My aunts, my teachers, and then some men came on the scene when I got to Wake Forest because they got to be my professors.
Yeah.
And they meant a lot to me, too. So certainly one in particular was my debate coach, Dr. Franklin Shirley, who served as alderman of the Northwest Ward and mayor of the city.
That's right.
So he was a mentor for me.
Wow. Wow.
But he believed women had a place at the table and that they could speak.
I think that is a good thing to live by, that there's room at the table for everybody, because everybody have the basic needs. We all want to be heard. We all want those basic things: food, clothing, and shelter. We all want to be heard. We all want to live and chase the American dream, and we all want to feel important and feel valued. And so I want you to know how much, again, I appreciate you. I could talk to you for another hour or two. You know, I don't forget.
We're bad for each other that way.
No, that's a good thing. I remember when I was dealing with the situation with my mother, and I talked with you about that. You were a listening ear.
I wish I could have been more helpful.
No, but you know, I love you. I appreciate you. If there's anything that I can do for you or your family, you know I'm here. Don't hesitate. It was truly a pleasure having the legendary Miss Martha Wood here on Off the Cuffs. Anything you'd like to say before we go, Miss Wood?
I just really appreciate the work you're doing.
Oh,
I really do.
Thank you. Thank you.
The best thing you can do for me
yes,
and
ma'am.
my family is to do your job to the very best of your ability.
I'm going to do that.
And so far, you have not let us down.
Thank you so much. Again, this is Bobby Kimbrough with Off the Cuffs with Miss Martha Wood. Thank you for joining us. Have a great rest of your week.